Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode of Power Platform TV. Today we're going to talk about PCF controls, and this is going to be a special episode. It's going to be a long episode, and it's going to be basically a beginner's tutorial in how to build PCF controls. So there's so much that you need to know, and really we're going to go through into as much detail as we can. This is going to be a long video. Like I said, it's going to be over 2 hours, so make sure you have a cup of coffee on hand and take lots of breaks when you go through this. But there's a lot to learn when it comes to building these controls. And I wanted to explain this from my point of view, because when I first started to learn about how to build these, I was pretty confused in terms of many of the concepts, right? There's so many questions that come up. Do you need to use React when you build these controls? What's the difference between a field control and a dataset control? Where can I use these controls? Can they be deployed to Canvas apps and model-driven apps and custom pages and Power Pages? What's going on there? So I wanted to kind of explain this in my words and go through a few examples and, kind of see as much as we can and get our hands dirty, right? So that's the aim of this. Before we begin, I would love it if you could hit the subscribe button. It's going to help me to create more content like this. But, let's go ahead and start to talk about these controls. So PCF controls are really exciting because you get to build cool stuff, right? And you get to show off really cool things in your application. You get to take the apps to places that they normally wouldn't be able to go without your help, right? And there's so many cool applications for this. You could see here we have in this case, there's a colorful Optionset PCF control here that's displaying all these different colors when it comes to the option sets inside of a view here in the Sales Hub app. We get to apply our controls to fields as well, and we're going to go through examples of all of this, so don't worry. But, we get to replace fields if we want to. We get to replace them with buttons. We get to replace them with our own fields. We get to hide the fields that are already there if we don't really want them to be displayed. And so there's different ways we can approach this when you're building PCF controls. And we get to put them into Canvas apps and custom pages, right? So, for example, here we have this great little example here of a Tic Tac Toe game that has been embedded inside of a Canvas app and put onto a model-driven app, right? So there's many ways that this can go here. And we can also call these from Power Pages. So you see here, for example, I have a little button here, and if I click on this, then we get a little pop-up that is a PCF control. You got it. So there's a lot to cover here. These are some of the things that we're going to kind of go through. We're going to talk a little bit about an overview of what PCF controls are, the Power Apps component framework, right? And we'll go into some cheat sheets that I created that's going to help us to build these controls a little faster, I hope. Get over the learning curve a little bit more quickly, let's say. We have building a standard PCF text box. Okay, so that's kind of the most basic example that you can go with, apart from a label. We'll start with a label actually, but a label and then a text box. So you'll see the inner workings of how these controls actually come together. We'll talk about virtual React controls. So what does that mean? Do we need to use React? Can I avoid React when I'm creating these PCF controls? We're going to talk about that as well. Then we'll go into data sets. So that's a whole different beast, right? Being able to replace a data set that is currently in a Power App with our own data set. I think that's a nice one that we're going to go through as well. Then we'll talk about some of the functionality that we get inherently as developers inside of these controls. So things like being able to navigate, being able to call web APIs in the Dataverse, right? There's different functionality that they expose that we can leverage that make our controls much richer. So we're going to talk through some of that. And we're going to go through some examples from the PCF.gallery, which is an incredible community site that was created. We're going to go through that site. We'll take a look at what's out there. And that also helps with the speeding up of the learning curve of building and understanding these PCF controls, because you look at what others have done and you can kind of see how they put their code together. And we're going to build out some controls in Canvas apps and custom pages, and then we'll finish off with Power Pages. We'll do a little deployment to a PCF control to a Power Page so we can see what that looks like up there. And first, we're going to start off with what are PCF controls. And you can go to this Microsoft Learn article and get a little bit more information and go and read through this. This is a kind of a good starting point here, and it has a little video as well in terms of some of the capabilities of what are PCF controls. And if we take a little step back here, you can see they're talking about web resources. And this is part of the reason, I think, how we arrived at PCF Controls to begin with. And they had some capabilities that bridged the gap between functionality that was missing and functionality that you needed, right? For example, if you were trying to extend a field, it was pretty limiting, really. You had some JavaScript on change events that you could access, and you could replace the field with a web resource and kind of go around and do it that way. But it wasn't really a very seamless experience, let's say, right? Web resources were also very useful if you wanted to display a web page inside of a D365 app or a Power App. You could embed the web resource in there, and you could pass context between the page and the web resource. So that was kind of useful as well. Maybe if you wanted to integrate with third-party systems, that's some way you could achieve that also. It was kind of useful for many use cases for a long time. But some of the problems it had is that it didn't really load at the same time as the rest of the page, so it wasn't really like a first-class resource. And a lot of the times it just didn't look as good or as integrated with the rest of the page. And so those are a couple of things that PCF Controls help with. And we're going to see that when we build these controls, we get to take advantage of Microsoft's Fluent UI, which is used throughout the Power Platform. And we get to build our PCF controls using Fluent UI. So we take advantage of that, and it just makes it look the same as the rest of the page out there. So you get that capability as a developer to tap into that, as well as all the other Node.js features that you'll be able to import when you're building these controls. And then finally, you get to deploy these controls across different parts of the Power Platform, right? So you build it once, and then you can deploy it to model-driven apps, to custom pages, Canvas apps, and Power Pages, right? It might work a little bit differently in those, and sometimes you may need to create the controls specifically or tweak them, I guess, when you're using them in these different places. But the principle is the same. You get to create Power Apps Component Framework controls, and you get to use them everywhere. So that's kind of a brief history of PCF controls. Let's go and take a look at how we actually go ahead and build these. So from a developer's perspective, and I do want to note that this is a pro dev thing we're doing here, right? We're doing a lot of code here. So this is not really low code, okay? It doesn't mean that, if you've come from the low code space and you're more of a citizen developer that, you can't get your hands dirty and try to do this, because you totally can. And I don't think if you're building simple controls, I don't think the learning curve is too steep, but there's a lot of concepts there. If you're not a developer, you may kind of struggle with some of this stuff. But this is what you'll need in order to build these controls, okay? So if you have Visual Studio installed already, you should have MS Build in there, and then you'll be able to build these controls, okay? So that's one thing that you'll need. The other thing is Node.js. So you can go ahead and head over to the Node.js site, which is located here, and you'll want to grab the LTS version here. Okay, so that's the one that Microsoft recommends, the LTS version. Go ahead and download that. That's the second thing you'll need. And then the final thing you'll need here is the Power Apps CLI. Okay, so the Power Apps command line interface, and there's really two of these that you can use. So you can kind of do this two ways. One of the ways is you install the Windows version of the Power Apps CLI, and that way you can kind of use it in Windows in your command prompt and kind of any way you want in Windows. Okay, the other option is to do it inside of Visual Studio Code, and you can actually get the extension that way. Okay, so you open Visual Studio Code, you go to extensions, and you install it that way. So it's kind of up to you, how you want to install this and where you'll be running your commands from. And let's take a quick look here at how to grab the CLI. So this is how you'll do it. You'll come to this URL up here. This is the Power Platform CLI. And we're going to go into a lot of detail about how to use the CLI. It's so cool because there's so much stuff that goes in here that isn't even PCF related. If you look at these broad kind of areas here, we have the environment lifecycle, we have authentication, we have Dataverse environment, solution packages, portals. So there's lots of stuff that you can do with this, and it's kind of a necessary thing now, I think, if you're building any kind of Dataverse stuff. So you'll want to install this, and this is where you have the two versions here. you see here it has install using Power Platform Tools for Visual Studio Code. The other one is the Windows one. And if when you open up Visual Studio Code, this is what you're looking for: Power Platform Tools. Okay, so that's the CLI. It doesn't actually say CLI when you open it up in Visual Studio Code, but that's the CLI. That's the one you'll want to install if you're running things from there. Okay, so you just go ahead and install it that way. Here's some instructions for side loading it, if you really needed to. And this is the one for Windows, and you basically just copy this command here and just run it, right? And you're going to get down the CLI for Windows. Great. So I want to now talk about the two different types of PCF controls that we can create. And when we build these are going to make a lot more sense, if you're coming from a background of basically nothing, right? So the two PCF controls we have are standard controls and React controls. Now, the standard controls are basically controls where React has not been loaded into the template itself. And like I said, we're going to go through each of these in deep detail. But the standard one doesn't have React out of the box. Doesn't mean you can't use React yourself if you wanted to, but it doesn't have React standard out of the box when you install the template. The React control does automatically have React in the template, right? So these are when I say PCF control types, I'm really talking about PCF templates. Okay, maybe that's a better way to describe. When we talk about virtual controls, what's interesting here is the way Microsoft built out the React templates is that you get to take advantage of React that's already being used in the Dataverse. So you don't need to upload React within the control. You're basically just taking advantage of what's already up there, okay? And that's very useful because it reduces the size of your controls a lot. And, so you're not actually having to upload all of the React stuff that you're using. You're just taking advantage of what's already up there. So that's, one of the benefits of using the React virtual controls this way, okay? But these are the two that are currently out there. Who knows if they'll add more? They might have support for other ones, but the Dataverse is using a lot of React stuff. So I think it's very useful to invest in learning React if you're going to be a PCF developer, but you don't have to know any React actually, if you don't want to, right? The reasons that you would want to learn React here, and we'll talk a little bit more about what is React a bit later, but the reasons you may want to learn it is like if you're inheriting code that another developer wrote, for example, and you're trying to support that code or extend it or something, then you'll probably want to learn more about React, right? Or if you want to take advantages of the React framework, and there's a reason Microsoft chose React, right? Because it's very rich. There's a lot of features in there that are very applicable to when you're building out these PCF controls, So yeah, you don't have to know any React, but you can totally go with the standard approach. But it's something that's good to learn, and I would probably put it on your radar if you're not already thinking about it. Okay, so keep that in mind. But these are the two types. So let's take a look at the two different types of controls that are available. So we have field controls and dataset controls. The field controls are controls where you basically go to a field on a form and you say, okay, I don't want to use that type of field anymore. I want to use my own custom PCF control there. Okay, so you're binding your control to this field, if that makes sense. Okay, so you're just replacing what's already there with your own control. And the dataset one, that's applicable to like datasets, so like subgrids and views, right? So if you go to a form and you see a subgrid, let's say you're on the account form and you have a subgrid of contacts, and you say to yourself, oh, I don't like that subgrid. I want to do things my way and make it look totally different. That's where the dataset control applies, okay? So you'll be able to replace what's already there with your own custom data set. Okay, so that's where the two different types of controls get applied. And I think the best way to kind of understand this is to take a look at some examples of this. And let's go over to the PCF.gallery. And if you're not familiar with this website, it's really cool. What it is, it's a community website. It was built by an MVP called Guido, and he built this for basically for everybody to use, right? I don't know if there was other people involved in the community that built this, and please excuse me if there was. And kudos to you guys, because this is amazing. But basically, if you're a developer, if you built a PCF control and you want to share it with the community, you can just come on here and just submit your control and upload it. And you can see here that so many people have done this, right? So we have all of these different types of controls. And if you're like an end user or a developer who wants to, maybe not end user is not the right word, but if you're a developer who wants to kind of consume these controls to use in your environment, then you can download these and upload them into your environment and then apply them to, fields or data sets in your org, and then users of that org will be able to access all of this cool functionality, right? Let's take a look at some of how some of these work, right? So even like this first one, account news control, let's go take a look at it. And it says here, if we scroll down, the controller showcase news articles relevant to the account. It says so we have here, we're on the account form, it looks like, and then we have some tabs here, and then they've created a new tab to display this section here, and this section has the news articles, right? So that's kind of a cool one. And if we go back here, user sign off, let's take a look at this one. A control to allow a user to select a switch or a checkbox and have their user appear next to the checkbox when it's selected, right? Oh, cool. So you can approve it. So they've basically attached this to a field here, approved, and then here's like kind of a signature and a timestamp almost, right? So that one's a nice one. React tagging, let's take a look at this. This one, because it's called React tagging, I'm guessing that they built it using React, and you can actually see in the description, it says, a control built in React Native that allows you to convert a single line of text into a series of tags, right? What's cool also is when you click, there's a download link here for this one. If we click download, let's take a look. So it takes us over to GitHub here, right? And this is all the source code it looks like. I haven't seen any of these before. So, the ones that I just showed you now, I haven't seen before. So I don't know. I'm assuming that all the source code is in here because it's in GitHub, and it looks like it is, right? So this is like the index.ts file. I highly encourage you to take a look at this PCF.gallery site, and you can see all these different categories here as well, right? So one of the ones I wanted to show you guys was grids. So if we go to grid here, so this is showing grids, and one of the coolest ones I think is this one, the colorful Optionset grid. And this is by Diana here. And if you don't know her, she's the PCF lady, and she has so much information about building PCF controls. So she's built this colorful Optionset grid here. And we could see here, if you click on here to visit, it's going to take you over to her website here, and she goes into all kinds of detail about how to use this thing. And also, if you click on the download button, you'll be able to grab the source code. So, and again, we'll talk about how to install this source code so you can use these controls later, okay? But this is an example of a grid itself. You can see here, this is we have this view here, active PCF testers, and she's applied this colorful Optionset grid to it. And I don't know if you guys I'm sure you've seen what the out-of-the-box grids look like. They're not as colorful as this, right? So your imagination is the limit in terms of how cool you want your PCF controls to look. And we talked about the two different types of controls, the field controls and the dataset controls. So I think the next thing we want to do now is actually build one of these, right? We've been doing a lot of talking. Let's go ahead and build one of these. And in going through this, there's a ton of resources that I'm going to provide to you guys. I think it's going to be pretty helpful in building these controls. One of the things here is a cheat sheet, and this is basically has everything in terms of how to initialize your projects if you're doing standard templates versus the React templates, whether you're doing fields or data sets, and then how to build these packages, how to deploy them up to environments, how these things kind of work, and then the errors that you may come across as well. Okay, so I'm gonna, I'll share this. I'm gonna put links in the description, and you'll be able to access all of this stuff, and it's gonna really help, I think, just in terms of getting up and running quickly. What we're also gonna do is go through an example here. Well, we're going to go through several examples, but this is the first one that we're going to go through here. First thing I'm going to do is create a field template here, okay? In order to do this, we can head over to either the Windows command prompt or Visual Studio Code. We're going to end up in Visual Studio Code anyway, but what I'm going to do is just start at the Windows command prompt, okay? And as I mentioned, you can run this from the developer command prompt for Visual Studio 2022. You can kind of run all your commands from there if you want, or you can run them from the just standard command prompt in Windows as well, right? The standard DOS command prompt. Ultimately, when you get to run the MS build commands, that's when you'll want to be coming over here to the Visual Studio one, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. So it doesn't matter, but like I said, I'm just going to start with the developer command prompt here. And let's go ahead. I'm just going to go into my directory here. Let's see, where am I? Here we go. So I'm in the correct directory now. And then this is where I'm going to run the pack command. So if you just type in pack here, it's going to tell you if the pack CLI is installed. And it is installed for me. If there's, and this is the version that I have running here, okay? So this is the latest version. If I was not on the latest version, it would actually tell me like, hey, do you want to go ahead and download the latest? So that's kind of the starting point here, the pack. And if you see down here, PCF, this is the PCF commands, right? So it says here, commands for working with Power Apps component framework projects. And, all of this other stuff, most of this other stuff we can ignore when we're doing PCF development. We will be using the auth to connect to the environment later to deploy our code. But all this other stuff, ignore for now. Don't kind of get too overwhelmed by this, okay? So if we type in pack PCF, then that's going to give us a bunch of other commands here. And you can see here, it says you're missing a subcommand because it's looking for one of these three here. So we have the init, the push, and the version. Init is the one that we're looking for here. And what I'm going to do is just jump back over to the cheat sheet here, and I'll show you guys the field templates. So the standard controls. So if I'm creating a standard non-React control, this is the command I'm going to use. Pack PCF init for the name, for the control's name, okay? And then -ns for the namespace here. And then -t, which is the template, and then the field here itself. I'm kind of using these shorter names here. You can see here, if I did instead of -n, I could do -- name, and then put the name in there as well. So what we're doing is we're using aliases here, and you can see here it says in brackets -n, -n, I guess, for the alias for name, and -ns for namespace, right? So you just might see that look a little bit different when you're running these commands. The other commands here that we're adding to the PCF init, we have the template. And like I said, the template is whether you want to do a field template or a dataset template. The code's going to look a little bit different, okay? That's why they have these two templates. And then the framework as well. So none means standard, and then React is the React one, okay? We're going to do a standard one first. And then if you want to specify the output directory, you can do -o. And this last one here is actually a useful one. I like this one. It is run npm install. So after you create the template, the first thing you're going to do is run npm install. And we'll talk about that in a second, because I kind of want to assume you guys don't know anything. And in order to understand what we're doing here, right? If you already understand this stuff, perfect, great. So this is the first one we're going to run. I'm just going to do this. We're not going to run the npm install just immediately in this one. We'll do it another time. So inside of this directory, just so I can keep things organized, pack PCF init -n, and then this is the name of the control. So I'm just going to call this one standard field, let's say, and then the namespace of the control. And to show you guys where the namespace is used, I'm going to do standard field namespace like that, ns, all right? And then -t for field, right? So when I click enter here, what's going to happen is, and this is going to happen very quickly here, it's basically installed a bunch of files on here. And if we go to take a look at this, we can see these are the ones that have been created. Okay. The next thing that everybody does, and you don't have to do it this way, but it's the kind of the most logical way to do it, is to type in code space dot, and this is going to open up Visual Studio Code to this directory, right? The other way to do this is simply just to go to Visual Studio Code, open it up in Windows, and then go down and say open directory and go to this directory, right? It does exactly the same thing. Okay, so if I just do this, be able to see the files in a much better interface. And let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And so these are the files that are created, right? And you'll want to go over to the terminal here. And so as I said, npm install we could have run automatically, but we're going to run it separately here. And now's probably a good time to sort of talk about what are we looking at here. And so it's created this subfolder here, and the subfolder has all of these different files. We have an index.ts file. So this is a TypeScript file, right? And you can see we're getting some errors here because it needs npm install to run. So if you're coming from like a .NET background, let's say, right, when you're creating projects in .NET, you might use something like NuGet to bring down functionality from other resources, right? And then those, NuGet installs DLLs locally, and then you can use those DLLs in your projects, right, to use that functionality, right? So npm is something pretty similar, where we get to bring down packages and use functionality from these third-party systems. And so because we're getting errors here, what we're going to do, we're going to run npm install here. And this can sometimes take a little bit of time, but it shouldn't take too long. But it's going to kind of bring everything down, and we're going to get a new directory that's going to be created up here in the top left. You'll see it in a second, a place that's going to hold these packages. And then that's going to hopefully clear up these errors, and then we'll be able to move forward. All of this stuff here that we get with this template, once we compile this and once we kind of build it and deploy it and compile it, we're going to end up with web files, right? Files that can be used online to display our PCF controls, right? So that's kind of the end goal. So all of this is a framework to build these controls for us and help us build them, right? And so that's kind of what we're looking at here. So it's a little bit different when you come from a web resource background. So, you're like, well, I just have, I have my HTML files and my JavaScript files. Like, where is that here? That doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? But if you think of it, this is kind of the framework. And it's, if you combine the concepts of building like a C# application, let's say, with a web application, this is kind of what you get, So you have all of this stuff to help you to get to the web side of things, all right? So that's what's going on here with these things. And you can see, by the way, it's compiled great, or it pulled down everything great. All those red errors have gone away. If you're getting any problems with this, you can look up here and you can see if there's any problems, right? And I've got some warnings here. This is really nothing to kind of worry about on my side. You may have problems here because you don't have certain packages installed or something. Let's kind of start here, I think. So this is like the entry point, all right? So this is one of the things that gets called in the life cycle when our control is loaded, okay? Different applications have different entry points. Like when you open a web page, what's great about this is we get context here, right? So when we attach our control to a field, for example, which is what we'll be doing here. So when we bind it to a field, right, we're going to get some context from our Power App or Dynamics 365 into here, and we'll be able to use that context within our control, all right? That's kind of the entry point here. And then if we scroll down, different things happen along the way. So update view here. So this is called when any value in the property bag has changed. Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about that. And then get outputs here is called by the framework prior to a control receiving new data. And then we have down here destroy, called when the control is to be removed from the DOM tree. Okay, this is something that you're going to probably spend a lot of time in the index.ts file. And then you can also structure this so that instead of having all your code in one file here, just like other development languages, you will put code in different files, just like classes, kind of, right? And then you'll be able to import those here at the top and be able to use those when you need to. And we will put some console messages here in each of these, because that's a great way to kind of learn like when these are being called as well, okay? One of the other biggies here, one of the big ones, is this one, the control manifest. So this kind of tells us like, what's this control about? What does it need? Obviously, we haven't changed anything here from the template, but we told the template, what's the name of our control? Well, we wanted to call it the standard field here, right? So it's put that in the display name key and the description key here, constructor, the namespace that we specified with the NS at the end. That's where this is used here. And if we go a bit to the right here, we have the control type here as standard, all right? They do a good job in kind of providing a little bit of information here in terms of like what you need to do if you're doing certain things within here, like calling an external service. And so this kind of has some information about that. And here is the property, right? You can see here, if I go to the right, it says property usage is bound. So there's really three types of properties, types that you can have in PCF controls. There's input types, output types, and bound types. And the bound types are basically bound to a control in the Dataverse, all right? So you're basically saying, like, for this field, I want our control to be to be in place of this the control that's currently in the Dataverse. And I think that's going to make sense in a second once we deploy one of these controls. And then the standard property here, the sample property. So it's automatically created a property for us. It's assuming that we have one property at the moment, and we can add whatever we want here. We can add multiples of these if we want, right? If we need to use anything that we need to use inside the control, can create here and then use, all right? So if I scroll to the right again, and then we have the last thing here is required. Is it required or not? And in our case, it's going to be yes, it's required, okay? So that's our properties. And then some other things we'll talk about later is like how to do styling, the styling of the controls. And then we have here other features that we can use and things like the web API and utilities and other things here. We need to go ahead and uncomment these if we're going to use them. Otherwise, we're going to run into errors. So let's take a look at some of the other things here. So like the node modules. So this is the folder that did not exist until we ran npm install. And then it's gone and downloaded all of these different packages here, right? So you don't really need to know much about this, but you just need to know that the dependencies are in here. They're in that folder. They were installed. Great. If there's any problems, then you can go and troubleshoot based on that. Then we have some other files here that you may or may not end up needing. I think as you become more of a advanced developer, that's when you'll start to get into more of this stuff. The git ignore here is basically once we build our control, if we were to deploy this to Git, for example, let's say to GitHub, right? If you go to the PCF.gallery and open up one of those controls and then go to GitHub, you won't see a node modules folder. The chances are you won't, because it's just going to be ignored by this git ignore file, because there's no need to put it in there, right? Because when you run npm install, it's going to bring everything down anyway. So you don't need it in source control. Same thing with some of this other stuff, like the files that get generated. So that's what this is for, the git ignore. Then you have some other things here regarding packages, okay? This will tell you some of the versions that we're using as well, in terms of like the specific packages that are installed here. And then we have a config directory here of where the output's going to go. And then we have a TS config here for some TS stuff. Okay, so that's sort of the high level view. The next thing that we want to do is just kind of run this, right? Just to kind of see what it looks like now. And the way to run this is through the npm start or npm start watch. And what that does, so npm is the node package manager, right? And that is part of Node.js, okay? That works with Node.js. So the node package manager allows us to run commands in kind of like the same way that the pack PCF or the pack CLI, I should say, allows us to run commands through the command line interface as well. And when we run, and let me just kind of type this in here. So like npm start, if we were to run this, it's going to open up a test harness for us, which is really useful. And actually, let me just go ahead and run this and I'll show you guys. And you can see here, before it runs, it's going to do a little bit of making sure that everything looks good, okay? And you can see here it's running ESLint. What's great about this is that it tells us if there's any errors. And you can see here, this is an error that I've been getting a lot recently. And there is a blog post out there by David Rivard. And so he had this same problem. And it basically says, like, you know, it can't find the module AJV disk compile code gen, okay? So how do you fix this? Like, what's going on here? Well, it can't find this module, but we need to bring it in here, okay? And so one of the ways you can do that is to run a command just to pull that down. So the command to fix this, npm install --save dev --save dev, and then I'm going to put AJV, okay? So this will save this for me for dev purposes in this project here, and then I should be able to go ahead and rerun this, okay? And I do get a couple of warnings here, but I think that looks good. So if I just go ahead and do an npm start again now, we should see this hopefully build and then open up the test harness. So again, you may or may not run into that issue. If you don't, perfect, you know. So let's see here. It's compiling and bundling the control and starting the control test harness. And here we go. Cool. Okay, so this is the test harness for PCF controls. And what's great is this is going to allow us to make changes to our controls locally and test them here without having to push them up to our Power App, right? So this is like a really useful thing here, and you can change form factor here to see how it's going to look in different things. You can change the component container width and height, right? So if you just watch this, if I make this like 500, you see over here on the left, it's changed. You see this little line here, right? This was going all the way across before. Now it's kind of in a bit to the left there. And then if I do the same thing here, now we have our box here, right? If I made this 100, for example, it's starting to look more like a field, right? So if you wanted to kind of test, you know, what this is going to look like, how it's going to play, if it's more like a field, you may want to do something like this, you know, depends like what you're using your control for, okay? Yeah, so this is kind of the test harness. I'm going to X out of this, and here I'm just going to click Control C to terminate this. A better way to develop and test this, instead of doing npm start, you do npm start watch. And then what's great about this is it enables you to make changes here on the VS Code side, and then without having to refresh your browser, it'll automatically refresh with those latest code updates, and then you'll be able to see, you know, and develop the control without having to stop and start this. Okay, so that's going to be a huge time saver, right? So it looks the same when you open it, but npm start watch, that's the one to use, all right? So let's go ahead and close this, because what I want to show here, let's go ahead and add some code, and I think this is like a really useful way of just trying to understand the flow of things here. So, you know, all we're doing here is, like, this is JavaScript, right, and TypeScript, and so we're building out, you know, just like you would do if you're building out your web resource, you can put in commands like console.log, right? And so I'm going to put in some commands here. So we got console.log in the init. I'm going to do console.log in the update view here. And I'm going to do in the get outputs, I'm going to do one as well. And console log get outputs, and then we'll put one in the destroy as well here, okay? Destroy, okay. So now let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see here how easy it is just to start to understand the flow of like what these things mean, because Is it intuitive? It's intuitive once you understand it. But if you look at it like this, some people maybe understand it faster than others, I guess, if you have a certain history or you're just super smart, right? So if I hit F12 and go into the console here, so you can see here what's run is the init ran and the update view ran, right? So that's our console.log here printing out. And then, you can start to play around with this. Like if I change the value, as soon as I put a 2 in, right, I didn't even tab off the field, the update view ran again, right? If I remove it, now it's like, we have 2 of these here. It's starting to track like these changes, right? So every time I click on this, right, update view's running, okay? So that's giving us an idea of because it said in the documentation, when the property bag updates, then update view is going to run, right? So this is kind of giving us a clue as to how to build our control here, right? When the init ran on load here, what do we want to do? What do we want to display to the user? So these are all kind of hints in terms of how to build this. So let's go ahead and we're going to build something here. Okay, so now we're back in Visual Studio Code, and one of the most simple principles here with PCF controls is how do we display our control back to the user, right? How do we know where do we put our code? Where do we put it? If it's an HTML web resource, it's like, you kind of know it goes in the body and that's where it's displayed, right? With a PCF control, where are we displaying our stuff? And this is where the container comes in. And so it says here, that this is a container here, and we have this here as a parameter, right? And if we just scroll a little bit to the right, this is an HTML div element, okay? So that's our container that's going to display whatever we want rendered in our control to a user, okay? So because it's an HTML div element, what we can very easily do, we can just kind of reference it here, right? So we can just say container dot, and then we could do an append child, and then here what we have, I'm just going to tab through here, document.create text node hello world, okay? So this is a very, very simple example. All we're doing is just displaying the text hello world, and we're binding it here to this container, all right? So what I'm going to do is click save here. And now if we go back over to our test harness, which is running in the background, and you can kind of see here actually before I tab, it says reloading browsers. So it just goes and does that little flicker of a refresh for you. And back over here, you can see that hello world is now being rendered here on this control, okay? So that's cool. And so what I want to do now is let's deploy this control up to a Dataverse environment. We'll go through that whole deployment step, and we'll spend a bit of time doing that, but then we're going to come back here and enhance this to build upon these concepts. So let's do this. So I'm going to close out of this, and let's stop this. Oops. Stop this over here, and we will build this out. So the first thing we want to do, and I'm back here on my cheat sheet, is to create a subdirectory here called solution, all right? And there's a whole bunch of manual steps here, and I want to go through these steps because I think it's important to understand here. But one of the shortcuts here, if you don't want to remember all of this stuff, is to use an XrmToolBox plugin, which I'm going to show you guys right now. This is one of the, probably one of the most well-used PCF tools out there, let's call it, I guess, or deployment tools or build tools, however you want to call it, is this one, the PCF Builder, okay? So this one was built here by Danish, the Power Maverick, and this guy does a ton of stuff regarding PCF controls in the community. And so he built out this XrmToolBox plugin, and kind of assuming here you guys know what XrmToolBox is, but basically it is a wonderful tool in the community which does all kinds of stuff to help you with development. And community people build plugins here, and Danish here built this plugin that can help us actually go through the life cycle of creating and building and deploying PCF controls. Okay, so go and check this one out and see if you like it, but I think you'll probably get some value out of it. But back to kind of the way that I'm going to do things now to explain things here is we'll head back over to the cheat sheet that I have, and it just kind of walks through the individual steps. And so, the first thing we want to do here is create a folder here that we're going to have our solution in. And so we will create a subfolder here called solution. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a solution folder here. So let's make dir solution, and I'm going to go into this solution folder. And the next thing I want to do here, now that I'm in the solution folder, is I want to run this pack solution init here. And here I'm providing the publisher name and the publisher prefix, right? So for the name, I'm just going to do this. And for the prefix, I'm going to do this, all right, for myself here, okay? So that's going to be the first step here. And it says the Dataverse Solution project solution successfully created here. And if I actually go in here and take a look, you can see that it's actually created some of these files here already, right? So it's doing its thing. It's getting us ready for a solution here. And the next thing we want to do is this one, pack solution add reference dash path, and then the path back to the base control folder here. All right, so I'm going to put back the path here. This is going to be videos, YouTube, PCF, standard field. So this is just the path for the PCF control that I created, not the solution one, right? We're in the solution one, but we're going to add a reference back to the main one here. So if I go ahead and click enter here, we should get that. It says here, project reference successfully added to the Dataverse solution. Okay, so now we're good there. All right, so the next thing to run here is MS Build. So I'm going to run it like this. There's a couple of different switches you can use here to, and it all depends on how kind of you're deploying this to an environment. And let me kick this off here. I'm going to come back to this in a second, but so I'm running this here, and if you have a problem running this from VS Code, then go ahead and open up the Visual Studio command prompt and run it from there. Okay, but it should run in. It's definitely going to run in the Visual Studio command prompt, and then it may or may not run in VS Code depending on how you have your system set up. So in my case, it's going to run perfectly fine in VS Code. That's great. And in terms of deploying this, we're going to use a method to push it up to the environment, which is called pack PCF push. Now, what we did here is we did create a solution. So, if we go back to our Windows Explorer here and we take a look at, we're in our solution folder here, we have a bin directory now. And if we go into this bin directory into debug, we can see the solution, like a solution zip file has been created, right? So this is our solution. And, this kind of comes back to a question of how do you want to deploy your controls up to your orgs? And this is an unmanaged solution here. So you could go ahead and take that and just deploy it up and use it. We did this, running the command here, this one here, MS build like this, right? If we were to run it using this command, okay, and let's just go ahead and run this and take a look and see. This one is going to create a managed solution, all right? So we'll see here, it's kind of going through and doing the same steps basically, but it's going to produce a managed solution. Now, with these two solution approaches, when you make changes to code, what you'll want to do is come over here to the control manifest and just update the version of the PCF control here, right? So if you update the version and then run any one of these two commands, it will basically create these new solutions for you. And let's just hop back over real quick, back to our solution folder. And then if we go back to our bin directory, here we have a release folder that's created, right? So this one's the managed one in here. And then we have in the debug, we have the unmanaged one here, okay? So those are the two ones created, but yeah, if you make changes and you want to do it this way, then you'll want to increment this version number here. So you'll get the solution files updated, and then you can deploy the controls between environments as well if you wanted them in a single solution like this, or you deploy it up to your development environments and then put it in the correct solution where you need it, and then you can deploy it that way. But there is another way to do this, and that is with the pack PCF push. So if we do pack auth list, we're going to see here in my environment, I have one Dataverse environment that I am currently connected to. But what I want to do is connect to a different one so we can kind of go through the steps here to see what it takes to connect, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do pack auth create and then dash URL and then the URL of the org that I want to connect to, okay? So this is going to basically open an authentication prompt, and I'll enter in my credentials here. I'm entering in here my username and password. I'm going to click sign in, and I am now successfully connected to the org. So if I were to go to pack auth list now, then we'll see that I am connected to this new org. It's automatically connected me and set it as it's automatically set as the default here, and we can see that through the asterisk here. If I wanted to connect back up to the first one again, for whatever reason, I would do pack auth and then select and then -- index, and then I can select the index here, which is number 1. Okay, so just to show you guys real quick, so that's connected me back up to the first one. If I do pack auth list again, it will show me the asterisk next to the first one now, and then I'm just going to go back over to the second one because that's the one I want to deploy to. And then the next command that I want to do is this one here, pack auth. It's pack PCF push, and then I get to define the publisher prefix here. So let's delete this, and I'm going to use just my name as the publisher prefix, and I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and now it's connecting to the org, and it's going to go and deploy this control up into the environment, okay? So it checks if it's already in there or not, then it goes and does an update, and we'll see it go through the whole process here to push this up to the org. And you could see there, what's really interesting is it does the build again. So, if there's any errors that are in the control, it's going to find those before it pushes them up. Okay, so that's been deployed up to the org. So now what we're going to do, let's go ahead and take a look at the org, see what we see. Okay, so now we are in the make.powerapps.com maker portal, right? Powerapps maker portal. And I've refreshed the page here, and there's no actual solution that was created, okay? There's no unmanaged solution, and there is no new managed solution for the push that we just did. But if we do go into the default solution here, and then if we go ahead and just search here for my name here, which we used as the prefix, there's our control, okay? So it's in there, it's all ready to go, and that's all good. I think what we'll do, let's put this on the account form. So I'm gonna go over here to account forms. So let's go ahead and put this on the account main form here. And I'm doing this in the default solution, which is a big no-no. I'm joking, but seriously, you shouldn't do it. So wait for this to load a little bit. And this is, again, where the concept that I was talking about earlier comes in, where, we're just attaching our PCF control that we created to a field. Let's use account number here. So I'm going to drag this new field across. All right, so we have account number here. So I've just dragged that onto the form. And one thing I do want to point out here is when you have this selected here, if you go into components and you click on plus component here. Okay, so one thing I want to point out here is when you click on account number and click on components and add components, you'll want to click on get more components here. And sometimes this doesn't work, okay? So in this case, for me, it is working here where I can see my standard component. But sometimes what will happen is this entire area will be blank. And I don't know if it's because I have a trial environment here right now that's causing issues, but just something to keep an eye on here. So if it is blank, then you can go through and do it through the standard classic interface. Sorry, not the standard interface. I think this should be the standard one. The classic interface. And let's go through that path now, and we'll add it that way. If you wanted to just do it to add it this way here, all you would need to do is just select what I just selected and it would be done. But basically, yeah, we'll go through the classic interface to show that way. And then later on in the video, I'm going to add different controls through this way as well. And let's go ahead and open this up in the classic here. So switch to classic. And so if we click on account number here, and let's go ahead and go to properties up here. And if we go over to controls here, we have the option here to add control, right? So I'm going to click add control, and then this is all the controls. These are all the controls that apply to the single line of text. And the one that we're looking for here, if I scroll up, is the one that we've created called standard field, right? So there it is there. So I'm going to select this and click add. And once I've selected it, I'm just going to make sure that I set it here to be able to be used in the web specifically, right? So I'm going to do that. And then here is the property display key. So this is our property, right? So we are binding this to the account number field, right? So that's the connection there, okay? So that's where it knows like where we want to display our control, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save and publish this, and we'll take a look at it on the form, and then we're just going to talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so that's been published, and now let's go over to a Dynamics instance that we have here. So I'm going to pull up an account. Let's go to accounts here. Okay, let's go into one of these accounts here. We'll see if the new field comes up, the new control, and there it is. Great. Okay, so we have account number, and then we have, and it's account number because it's bound to this field, and then we have our text here, right? Now, account number really has nothing to do with this in our case, because all we're doing is we're displaying a PCF control. So something that would be probably more applicable in our case is if we just hid the label for this, right? So if I just go back over here, I'm going to go back to properties here. And here we have a display label on the form. So if I just uncheck that and save, and then I'm just going to save and republish, and then we'll take a look at this. And now, so if we go back over to our account here and refresh this page, we should see the label gone. And that kind of shows a little bit more about, this is kind of independent, right? So we can see here that the field is displaying now without the label, right? So here we have this displayed here. And so if we just kind of recap what we've done at the moment is we've created a PCF control using Visual Studio Code. So we created the field template, right? And then we took that field template, we just added a hello world to it to render a label. And then we deployed that to our environment using the pack PCF push. And then we bound that to this account field here on the form so that we can display it. And we ended up hiding the label of the account number field. We ended up hiding the account number label, and now our field's PCF control here is kind of just sitting there on the form, and it looks good, right? Awesome. So let's go ahead and do some cool stuff now. Enough of this kind of like basic stuff, So let's go back over to Visual Studio Code. We're going to get rid of this code here. And what we'll do is let's create a text box here. So to do that, we're going to create an input. And now we'll do a set attribute on this field here. And we'll do type is text. So like so. And then the final thing we'll do is we will do a set attribute, and we will set the value here, and we will just give it a default value of hello world. Okay. And you know what? I'll make it number 2 here, so it just distinguishes from what we already did with the previous label that we created. And then the final thing we'll do here is a container.append child, and then we will append this new create element that we have, right? So again, we have to set the container to something so that it appears on the screen, right? That's what we're doing here with this final line of code. Okay, so we're going to save this, and then the next thing we'll do is we'll run this. So we'll do npm start watch, and that will open up the test harness here. And there we have it. So we actually have a text box here now, right? So if I click into this, this is actually a text box, and we have it set to the hello world 2. And let's just make a note here on the right. So it's retained this value from our original example here, but these two values don't match up, right? The text box does not match the property over here, right? So if we were to change the text box over here, nothing happens with the value. And if we change the value here, nothing happens with the text box, okay? So that's the next thing that we're going to take a look at. But at the moment, we have done our first thing here where we've created a text box control, and it's running in our test harness in our PCF test environment here. Okay, so let's do this. So instead of having hello world 2 here, what we'll do is we'll set this to the property value. Okay, so we have our sample property, and we're going to set it to the actual value here. And the way to do that is to do this, do context.parameters. And you can see here we have within the context here, we have a lot of stuff that we can use. And if I actually just go and jump back here, and we'll take a look at a couple of these soon, but we have here the various things like the client, device, factory, fluent design language, formatting mode, navigation, right? Lots of these things here that we can utilize when we're building PCF controls. And one of the nice ones here is the parameters. And so when you set the parameters here, you can get access to the properties that you have. And then basically, in this case here, what we'll do is we'll actually get the value of the property, okay? And we'll also set this to empty string in the case of a null value, right? So let's go ahead and just save this, and we'll hop back over to our test harness. And we can see now that the value here is defaulting from the value over here in our sample property, which is cool, right? So if we change the sample property now, so if I'm deleting values here, nothing's changing on this side, all right? So there's still not that connection for the update, but we do have at least a sync in terms of the display, right? And the same deal over here. If I delete on this side, nothing's happening to the value over here, right? So that's the next thing we're going to look at. And so the way to do this is we'll come back over here, and we will, let's create a new property here. So it's going to go like, it's going to look like this, private underscore input element, and this is a HTML input element type, okay? And then now if we scroll back down to our init here, so instead of doing it this way, let's create a new line in here, and we'll say this dot underscore input element, and then is equal to, and we'll do this as HTML input element, all right? So we have this here now, and then we can set the same attributes that we were setting before. So if I just go ahead and tab through this, we have here, it's setting the type to text, it's setting the value to the sample property, and then we'll go in and do an append child on the container. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this previous code here. So now we just have this stored in this input element. And let's just go ahead and test this real quick. So if we just go and save this file, and then we'll hop back over to the test harness over here, and then we're still in the same position where it's basically loading the value. Okay, so that looks good. So now one of the missing pieces here is what if we change the value of the text value, okay, in our text box. So if we do that, we want to update our sample property value, okay? So if I go through and tab through this, so now what we're doing says this dot input element, add event listener. So we'll add an event listener, an event listener for when the input changes. And then if that changes, we're going to notify output changed here. Okay. So this is a PCF callback method that tells the framework that there's been an update. Okay. So what happens when an update is made? Well, we go into here into the get outputs. And this is where we're going to actually set a value here to our PCF sample property. And this is what it's going to look like. And it's going to be basically sample property value is equal to our input element dot value. Okay. So let's go and save this, and we'll head back over And here we are in the test harness. And so because this is refreshed, we have the value from the sample property. So that's the same value is in the text box. And let's go and make a change here. So if I delete the number 4 here, you can see here that automatically the sample property value has changed as well, right? So I can just go ahead and delete all of this. And when I'm typing in here, it's updating the value automatically, right? The flip side to this is when you update the sample property, is that going to update the text box over here? So if I say hello world, it is not updating it. And let's go and tab back over. So now if we want to update our control when the property changes, right, we need to do that in the update view here. And we can see the update view, the description says it's called when any value in the property bag has changed, right? So in order to update our control, we're going to come in here and we're going to add this line of code here. And it basically says this dot input element set attribute value. And then we're just setting the value to whatever in the property bag again. Okay, so we did this up here when the initial control loads, right? We're setting it to whatever is in the property. And then when the update runs, if a user updates the property, then we're going to come in here and we're going to update our control with that value. Okay, so that's all that this does. Let's get rid of this console.log. We're going to go ahead and save this, and then we'll jump back into the test harness. And so back over here, if I enter in a value in the property now, so let's say I put the number 2 in here, we can see it's automatically reflected here in our control, right? So if I do 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, anytime I'm entering here, it's reflected over here. And then back over here, if I start to delete these, we see that it's being deleted on the right-hand side as well. Okay, so these two are now in sync, which is really nice. So let's go ahead and deploy this now, and we'll see what it actually looks like in our environment. So I'm going to go ahead here and stop the test harness. Okay, so to deploy this, we're going to just do the pack PCF push again. Okay, so those customizations have now been published. So now let's go ahead and take a look and see what they look like up in the Dataverse. So here's our app, and what I'm going to do is refresh this page here. Okay, great. So there is our text box here. And let's go ahead and start typing here. And we'll notice here from the top, we have the form is not dirty right now. Okay, so it's showing as saved. And as soon as we start typing, so if I type a number 1 here, we can see that it's gone to unsaved, right? So the control is telling the page that it's changed through the property. And basically now, if we go ahead and let's just save this value here, right? And if we go and let's pull up this record again one more time. So this is the account here for a datum. And if we pull up this account one more time here, we'll see that the value is persisted, right? So it's actually saved into the account number field because that's the one that we have this tied to, right? So that looks really good. That's a very simple example of a PCF control now interacting with the page and actually having data being saved. So let's hop back over to Visual Studio Code, and I want to show you guys how to debug these controls. And let's just do a npm start watch again, and we'll bring up the test harness and I'll show you how to debug. And you can also debug on the dynamic side or the Power App side, and we'll see that again as well after this. Great, so here's our control, and if I hit F12 on the keyboard, it's going to take me back here into the sources here for the developer tools. And a quick way to bring this TS file up here, and you can see I have this loaded here, is to, let's just close all of these. And what we can do is just go right to the top, search in files, and let's say we search for update view, because this is one of the methods in my files, right? And then if we scroll down a little bit here, here is our index.ts, and you can see this is our code, right? So this is where our code resides, and over here, let's just make this a little bit bigger here. I can put breakpoints in here just like anything else, you see. So I have a breakpoint here on the update view. So let's just put that breakpoint back in here. So if I were to make a change now to the property here, so if I type the number 1, you see I get to hit the breakpoint, right? And then let's just move this over a little bit to the right here. We can see here that we have our different properties here, and we can zoom over and get values. Okay, so there's the hello world 1, right? So that's a way that you can do some debugging, just like any kind of JavaScript debugging. And I'm just going to play this here. And back over on the Power App, if I hit F12 and do the same thing, let's do this over on this side. So you can see that you can also do some troubleshooting on this side. So let's do a search in files here, and I'm going to search for update view. And you can search for anything, obviously, that's in your code. This is just a quick way to grab that file. So if I scroll down a little bit here, and then there's our index.ts. And then if I were to, and obviously you can put the breakpoints anywhere. You can put it in the init function, in the assign, update, anything you want here. So let's just put it back on this one here. And then if I hit the number 2 here, then now we hit our breakpoint, and same debugging can occur here, right? So just wanted to give you guys that little tip, and it's also a good way to just kind of step through the code and make sure you understand how everything works. Okay, so let's go ahead and play this now. I'll close out of this, and got to hit that breakpoint a couple of times. Now what we'll do is I'm going to go back to our project, and let's take a look at the functionality that we get through the context. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete this code here, and we'll start fresh. And what I'm going to do is add a little button on this form here. And let's just get rid of this, and we can also get rid of this. We don't need any of this for now. This is all fine. All right. So back to the init function here, and it's complaining about something here. May have removed something by accident. Here we go. Let's just add this back in. Okay, we're good now. So let's go back to the init function here, and I will add a button in this time. Okay, so let's do constant button, and then HTML button element and create element button. Okay, now we have some inner text that we can add. I'm going to add that inner text here, so it'll just say click me. And then here we can add a listener. So on the click of the button, what do we want to happen? And I'll just take this default here, which is the alert of hello world. So that looks fine. And then the final piece here really is add that back to the container. Okay, so we're adding the button into the container. So if I were to, let me just go and save this, because we do have this still running here in the background. And if we just take a look in the test harness now, and let's just go and play this. We had this running before. And here we have the button here, right? So if I click on this, we get the hello world, right? So that's great. That's all we need there for this one. So back in Visual Studio Code, we want to do some more exciting things here. And so one of the things we'll do is we'll take a look at the context navigation functionality that we get when we're building these controls, okay? So this is really similar to the dynamics modals for alerts. So let's go ahead and add some code here, and I'm going to say var alert strings is equal to, and then let's add here confirm button label, and then let me tab through here. So the confirm button of our modal pop-up that's going to appear, we're going to set to OK, and the text is just going to be hello world. Okay, and we can also add in here a title, and I will just set the title to hello world title, let's say, to distinguish that from the text. Okay, so we have this one here ready to go, and then we can set the height and the width of our modal pop-up here. So I'm just going to take these defaults here. So now the next thing is to actually do the XRM navigation open alert dialog, right? And this is defaulting here in my environment. I'm just going to take this here because it's going to save me some typing. But instead of XRM, we're doing context, because we're grabbing this from the context object here, right? And instead of the navigation with a capital N, this is going to be a lowercase n, okay? So if I were to just hit the context here, we could see all of these other methods that are available to us. And this is the navigation one that we're using here, Okay, so we've used parameters before to get the default value of the parameters back into our app. And then this one here is navigation. And if I go ahead and actually look at the second part of the navigation, we see here we have the open alert dialog, we have an open confirm dialog, open error dialog, and some other things here, right? So this is going to look very familiar for people who have used this functionality inside of a Power App or D365. So these are available through standard D365 and Power Apps, but they've been exposed this way inside of PCF Controls. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll go and try to run this now. So back over in our test harness, if I click on Click Me, we get the Hello World alert that's still in there. It's not giving us the full navigation dialog here. So what we will do now is let's go and publish this up to our Power App, and then we'll take a look at it from there. So back over here, we will exit our code. Let's stop this code from running, and we will publish once again to the Power App. Okay, that's been published. So now let's go over to our Dataverse. Great. Okay, so there is our button here, our PCF Control button. Okay, so now let's go and click on this, and we see our first Hello World. And then here is our alert dialog. Okay, so we have the title here at the top, Hello World title, and then we have the text here, and then we have our OK button here. Okay, so we click OK and it closes. I can click this again, and then I can click on the X here and then close it that way. Okay, so that's our standard open alert dialog. So let's go back to our developer environment, and this time what we'll do is let's get rid of the alert here. And so here instead what I'll do is I'll put display value, and we're going to print out some information here from the user settings that we get in the context. All right, so in order to do this, I'm going to do a couple of backticks here, and then let's say username, and we will print this out here. So I will do a $, and then open curly brackets, and then context dot. And then here in the user settings here, I get the username here, okay? So I'm gonna grab that one, and let's do the same thing here with the user ID. So I'm gonna say user ID, and then it looks like it's giving me the user ID here from the user settings already. And it looks like it added something else here that I don't need, the org ID. Let's get rid of this. And what I'll do actually here, let me get rid of the org ID here. And so that looks pretty good. And what I'm going to do is just hop back into this one, and we'll see some of the other things that are available to us here. So we have the date formatting, we have get time zone, offset is RTL, language ID, number formatting info, security roles, and then the two that we're printing out here, okay? So there's some information that could be useful to you when you're building your Power App. And what we will do here is let's go and instead of having the text as hello world, I will replace this with our display value, okay? So I'm going to go save this and then deploy this back up to the environment. Great, that's been published. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Dataverse now. We will do a refresh here. Okay, that's loaded. And now if I go ahead and click here, we see that we get the information that we have requested. So we have the username, and here's my username, and then we have the user ID coming back as well, right? So user settings is something that could be useful when you're building out these PCF controls for sure, right? I'm going to click OK here, and let's go back to our environment. And back here in Visual Studio Code, let's take a look at one more thing here in terms of the user settings. So what I'll do is instead of all of this, I'm just going to get rid of all of this here. And let's go ahead and open up a page, like a web page instead, okay? So first thing we'll do is we'll set the size. So we'll just say, let's call this URL options. And then we will set this to, let's do open close brackets here, and we will grab the height and the width. Okay, so we'll set the height to 300, the width to 400. Sure, that looks good. Okay, So now the next thing is actually right here. So we have the context navigation.open URL. And then here we're actually providing the URL, and we are providing our URL options that we've specified up here, okay? So pretty straightforward. I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and then we'll republish it. And let's see how it looks up in the Dataverse. Okay, that's been published. So now let's go back over to our model-driven app, and we will refresh this page. Okay, and now if I click on the button here, here is our web page, right? So it's opened it up in the size that we've specified, and it's going to the URL Bing that we specified as well, right? So that's how that works, and I think that this functionality is going to be really useful for when you build out these PCF controls, really when you're interacting with these pages in your app, right? I think that this stuff is very useful. Great. So navigation is cool, right? Now let's go ahead and try something else here. So I'm going to get rid of this code here. We'll keep the button there. Actually, we'll do this. So the code within the button we're going to change here. And what we'll look at now is context.WebAPI. So if I go here and click on this, we see that we have these different WebAPI methods. So this is, really cool because we can do things like create records in the Dataverse, we can delete records, retrieve multiple, retrieve a single record, or update a single record. Okay, so this is the functionality that we know about when we use WebAPI from a typical Power App or D365. And we have this available through the context inside of our PCF controls. So let's go and run through some examples here. What we'll do is I'm going to do a create record. So let's go ahead and do a create record here. And I'm just going to take these this sample code here. So we'll go through and tab through this. And if we take a look at this, we have basically it says we're going to create an account. It's going to be called sample account. And let me call this sample account PCF test, just in case there's one that already exists. And then basically we get here the success and the error. And the on success, it will basically do a console.log with the ID of the account that's been created. Okay, and if there's an error, it's going to throw an error message here. Okay, so this looks pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and you know what? We'll do two tests in one here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do this, and then once this is run, we will also do another retrieve. We'll do a retrieve multiple here. Okay, so web API, and then we'll do a retrieve multiple, and I'm going to accept all of this code here. And that looks good. All right. So I think these two tests are pretty sufficient. If you know how to do these two, you'll know how to do the update and the delete. Right. So with the retrieve multiple, we're going to select the name of the account. And we're just going to loop through that in a for each here. We're just going to print this out to the console here. So I think this looks pretty good. I'm going to do a console log here as well. And I'll just put here retrieve multiple, so that we know that it is running where it's running. And I think up here, I'm just going to do a, let's call this create. Okay. Okay. So create record, why not? And you know what, actually with the ID here, I think we actually just want to put an ID like this. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so if we were to run this now, it actually wouldn't work because we need to uncomment something in the control manifest to allow web API calls to work. And so to do this, we're going to head back over here to the control manifest. And so if you scroll down at the bottom here, there's this area feature usage, okay? And so this is all uncommented by default. And you can see down here we have the web API. So what we're going to do is we will uncomment everything except the web API to get this to work. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment here. And let's get rid of this text here. And we will comment out everything here except for the web API. Okay, so we just need to do that, and then our PCF control is good to go. So I'm going to go and now deploy this up to the Dataverse, and we'll give it a run. Okay, great. So that has been deployed. So let's go up to our org again. Great. Okay, so the page has been refreshed, and now what we're going to do is hit F12 and go into the DevTools, and we will clear this out, and I'm going to click me here to run our code, and we'll see our web API code running. Okay, so we can see that the create record and create multiple has run. Here is a list here of all the accounts. Okay, so that's the retrieve multiple working. And then here is the account that was created. It says account with this ID has been created, right? So to take a look at that account, we can just go into accounts here, and I'm going to just type the word PCF to filter this one, and I'll need an asterisk in front of this. And then there is our sample account, right? So if we just click into it, that's the account that we just created then. So the web API code is pretty simple to run, and you should be able to get good mileage out of it when you're building your apps. Okay, so now let's move on to dataset controls. So to create a dataset control, the first thing I'm going to do is make a directory to keep the control in, and this one will be called sample dataset control, and then I will go into this directory, and we will run the PCF init command again, and this time we'll use the template for dataset. Okay, so it's going to be pack PCF init, and then give the name, and we'll call it sample dataset control, and then the namespace, and we'll do the same thing here, control ns for the namespace, and then now we need to do -t for the template, and then dataset here. Okay, so that will install the dataset template, and then what we'll do also is run npm at the same time, so it'll just save us a step basically instead of running npm install next. So if I hit enter here, we will see the template be installed, and then in this directory, and then now you can see it's running npm install, and this will finish shortly. Okay, that's completed, and we can ignore these warnings for the purpose of this video. So next thing is we'll go into Visual Studio Code by typing code, and then this dot here, and then I'm going to hit enter, and then this will open up VS Code at the location of this directory. And let's make this a little bit bigger here. And we can see we already have the node modules because we ran npm install. And then let's take a look at these files. So we'll compare these to the field template that we previously ran, and you can see here that this one has in the import here, it has a couple of new lines that are different from the field template, right? So this one says import dataset interfaces, and so we get this line here, and then we also have type dataset is equal to this. Okay, so that's one of the differences we'll see. If we scroll down a little bit here, everything here looks pretty similar. Okay, we still have these four methods here: the init, update, view, get outputs, and destroy. So that looks very similar. If we go into the control manifest here, this also does look quite similar. And if we scroll down here a little bit, what we can see here is this is dataset. Okay, so this was not in the field template dataset here. Okay, so that's a little bit different here. Okay, so let's go into the terminal here, and the first thing I want to do is run npm run build, and this will build our project here. And I ran this on purpose because you can see here that we have this property helper is not defined error. Okay, and the way to fix this one is if you go into the eslint file right here, this one, and then if you go into rules here, what we'll do is we'll add a new rule, and we'll make it no undef, right? And then we'll make this warn. Okay, put this in brackets in quotes as well. Okay, so just like this, adding this line should take care of that problem. So now if we save this and we rerun the build, we can see that we got past that error. Okay, and now if we scroll up a little bit, we can actually see that this is the other error that we got with the field control, and we know how to resolve this one, and that is if we scroll down a little bit here, we will do an npm install, and then -- save dev, and then ajv. Okay, so let's just let that run. Okay, so that package is in there. Now if we run the build one more time, and keep in mind, you might not get some of these errors, let's say, when you're doing this in your environment, but these are things that I've run into in my environment, obviously, and so this is how I go ahead and fix these. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and run this in the test harness now. So if we do npm start watch, so this will open up the same test harness as before, and let's go and take a look at the slight differences that we get with the dataset control. Okay, so we can see here that it looks basically the same. We can still set the width and the height of the component. And here is something that's a little bit different here. So we can see here it says sample dataset, and we can select a file. Okay, so I have a file that's a sample dataset, and here it is, and it's basically a CSV file, and I have 3 columns in this. I have first name, last name, and email. And the first row here is the header of the columns. And we can use this file to basically test our dataset control locally before we push this up into the Dataverse, right? So the way to do that is to select the file here. And so I've selected the file, and in selecting it, this has picked up that there's actually 3 columns here, right? We have the first name, which is a single line of text, the last name, single line of text, and the email, single line of text. And actually, you can see here, if you click on to the type here, you can see that actually there's different types that you can set for these fields, and you actually have a single line email here field as well. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now I will click apply, and in clicking apply, actually nothing happens in this case because we actually don't have any code here that displays the data set, right? So we need to go back to our VS Code and add some code in there. So here I am back in VS Code, and I'm going to go over to the index.ts file here. And then, so the first thing I want to show you here is that this is essentially a PCF control just like the field control, right? So I could actually just print out an output here, just like I did with the field control, and that's it, you know. So if I were to do, let's say, container.pendChild, and then I were to do this, create text node, and then hello world, then if I were to save this and go back over to my environment, my test harness, it would basically look like this. It would just print out the hello world, right? If I were to publish this now to my Power App, and then I bound this to a grid control, it would actually still just display this same label. So that kind of gives you just an idea of what we're doing here, right? We are replacing what's currently there, but we can replace it with whatever we want. And obviously it wouldn't make sense to put a label up there, but we'll see next that what we can do is tap into what the context gives us, and then we'll be able to display that in the place of the grid. So let's get rid of this here, and what we'll do is let's take a look at the context. So if we do context.parameters, and then we do sample dataset, and by the way, sample dataset, if we go back to our control manifest real quick, this is the sample dataset here, okay? So this is what we are provided with. And back in the TS file, the index.ts, if I were to hit the dot here, basically, we can see what we have access to here. And so this is all really regarding the dataset now, right? So we have add column, we have columns, we have different, we have like an error message here. And if we scroll down a little bit, this is where it gets more interesting. We have paging here. We have records, right? We have set selected records, sort records, so sorting. So we have all these different properties that are basically available from this data set. And let's take a look at the columns here. So we have columns here, and then if I just go ahead and hit tab here, and we just grab the suggested code. So basically what this is doing is it's saying for each of these columns, let's go through and print out the display name. So actually, let me move this over into the update view here, because we'll see in a second it'll make sense. So firstly, so I've added this to the view, and the browser here has reloaded. So let's hop back over to the test harness. And once again, let's go ahead and select our file. And in selecting the file, now I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And if we go into the console now, let's take a look at the console here. And you can see here, first name, last name, and email are printed out here, okay? Now, I do want to note that here we have also some headings printed out. This is kind of like a sample data set, I believe, that gets loaded in the background that we can basically ignore, but it's part of the test harness, I think. So the main thing to note here is that we are getting our code printed out here. And what's also interesting is just the same way with the field controls. If we go into the sources here, we can search for our index.ts file. And basically here is where we can see the code actually running, right? So if we need to debug anything, we can just come in here. But at the moment, this looks correct. It looks like the code is working. And the reason I put this into the update view is because the init, basically, when it runs, it does not have the file just yet of the data set in the test harness. So you need to put that into the view for that code to run to get the print out the headings like we just did. So let's go back over to VS Code and let's add some more code now as well. So we printed out the headings here, and then the next thing that we can do, and it's kind of interesting here, you can see the Copilot is suggesting some paging information here. But what we're going to do this time is we'll go back into the parameters, sample data, and actually this is actually correct, the one that it's predicting here that we want to use. It is the sorted IDs for each, okay? So we can basically enhance this code a little bit to, let's say we wanted to print out the email address, okay? So let's do a var email, and that's equal to record.getFormatted_value, and then here it's actually going to be email, okay? So, and it looks like I'm missing the equal to sign here. And so that's how that looks. And then if we want to print out that value here, let's go ahead and do that into the console. So it would be as simple as that. So now this should go through each of the records in the sample data set that we upload and then print out the email address. Okay, so we're back in the test harness, and let's go ahead and select the file one more time. And before I do anything else, I'm going to hit F12, and we'll just go into the console here. And this is printed in the background, so this we can ignore. But if we clear this out, when I hit apply here, let's see what happens. So now our code's running, and we have two sets of code that's running now, right? So we have the headings here, and then we have the actual email fields that are printing as well. Okay, so that's really cool. That looks like it's working as expected. One thing to note here is this is case sensitive right here. So if you put a lowercase e for email, for example, then it's going to basically not find the field and you'll get an undefined error. So how do we turn this into a grid, right, to replace our actual subgrid in the Power App? And really, this is up to us now because we have full control over how we want this to be displayed. So what we'll do is let's go through a simple example where we print out a table that's going to replace the dataset table in a Dynamics org. And the way to do this, we're going to firstly come over here and we'll define a new property. And let's define this new property here, and it's going to be private container HTML div element. Okay. So we have this one ready to go, and then here in our init, we're going to say this container is equal to, and we'll do container, okay? So now that's all ready, and now in the update view, we're gonna add some code in here that will kind of utilize sort of what we did here with the console logs. We're going to do something very similar, but we're going to embed this in the table that we are creating here. So the first thing, this container inner HTML, and we're going to set this to empty here. So this will basically reset the table that we're creating. And then to create the table, variable table is equal to document.createElement table. So that looks good. And let's go ahead and create a table row like so. And then here what we can do is we can utilize this code that we already have here. But instead of doing a console.log here to the display name, we're going to do this. We're going to do, instead of the th here, I'm just going to change this to a tr. Okay, so actually a td, so we got table data. And then I'm going to do this line here where I basically append a child to the table data, and I'm doing the display name here. Okay, And then I can append that to the row and close that off. And that will need one of these as well. Okay. And we can get rid of these two and we're good. Okay. So that is the header there that's going to go into our table. So we're creating our table here. We're creating the header. And then the next piece is going to be the data inside of the table. And so here, instead of doing it with the console.log, let's get rid of this. And what we will do is we will create another table data in here. Let me get rid of this like this, and I'll do a variable table data, and we'll create the table data. And then I'm going to do a table data.append. And let's take a look at this one. Maybe this is what we need. Let's see. Okay, so now the problem here is that we are getting only the name column here, but we want to get all the columns, right? So let's go ahead and build this out. Basically, what we'll do here is we'll add in a table row. And then what we'll do is copy this code here that's giving us the actual columns. And we'll be able to traverse through the columns this way, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just tab through here and accept this code. And we can see here what we're doing is we will basically go through, as we did above, grab all of the columns, and then we'll create these table data, and we'll append to the child here of the table data. We will append the formatted value of the column name, okay, for this record ID, right? So it's going through all the records. It's basically saying, give me the data for every one of these fields, okay? So we're going to go through and do that. We can get rid of this code here. And the last thing we will need to do is just append this into our table here. And I think we actually need to do this above as well. So let me grab this code, and we are going to append this here as well, right here. Okay, and now the final thing we'll do here is we will append this back over to our container here, okay? So let's go ahead and save this, and then let's go back to our test environment. And straight away you can see that we have this data being rendered here. So we have a table being rendered here. And so this is the sample one that I mentioned earlier that is in the background here, and this is nothing that we've loaded intentionally. It just gets loaded by the framework, okay, for testing purposes, I assume. So we can see here that this has three fields: the name, telephone one, and address one, city. And then we have the values here as well for each of these fields, right? Each of these columns, each of these rows, each of these values. So now what we'll do is we will load our data set, the actual data set. And so now this has been selected, the CSV file from before. And once we click apply, let's watch what happens. So we can see here now the update view ran, and our actual data now from our CSV file is being rendered here in a table in a data set. So this is really cool. I think it's nice. So we have the first name, the last name, the email, and then we have this is the first row here. Let's do this again. So this is the first row, Bob Smith, and then there's his email address. So we're going to talk about styling as well, because this, you know, we could push this up to the Dataverse now and in our environment and replace a current grid that's on our environment, and then this is what we would get, right? But it doesn't look great, does it? It doesn't look very good. So let's go back over to our VS Code. And the way to do implement style sheets here, so if we go to the control manifest here, and if we scroll down a little bit, here, so here we have, this is commented out at the moment. It says uncomment to add more resources. And here is a CSS, okay? So let's go ahead and we'll do this. I'm gonna get rid of this here. We'll put this up here, and I'm gonna go and comment this one out here. And so the only thing that we have here uncommented is our CSS, and we have a path to the CSS, and we can provide an order as well. So we'll keep that at 1. We only have one file, and the CSS here is in this subfolder, and then we have the name of the CSS here, okay? So let's go ahead and follow the same pattern. So I'll come over here and I'm gonna add a new folder. I'll call it CSS. And then in here, I'm going to add a new file, and I'll give the name of the file here that's already specified in the control manifest, okay? So these two look good. And what I'm going to do is go back into the TS file here. Let's tweak this a little bit. So instead of having a table data here, I think what I'm going to do is do a table header, and that way we can just distinguish a little bit more easily the header and data values. Okay, so I have that changed, and now let's go back over to our CSS, and we're going to add some pretty basic CSS here. So let's get table in here, and then we will do width 100, border collapse. All right, so that looks good. And then we'll do a table row, and table data. And this is what this is going to look like. Let's do it like this. Table row, table data, and we will do a padding 8 pixels, and then we'll do a text align left, and then we'll do border bottom, and we'll make it 1 pixel solid. Yep, DDD. All right, so that looks good. So this is going to be the header. So this is going to be the table row, table data, and then the table header. Let's go and take this one here. And what we'll do here, let's make the background color this color, and we will make the font weight as bold. Okay, so this is going to be the header. Okay, so that'll distinguish the header from the rows. So this all looks good. Let's go ahead and save this, and we'll go back to our environment. Okay, so this looks so much better with the style sheet than without the style sheet, right? So we have the table header across the top here, we have a background there, and we are bolding it, and then we have our rows beneath that, our data rows. So let's go ahead and add in the sample spreadsheet. So I've selected the sample spreadsheet here, and now I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And there is our data. Okay, so this looks really cool now. I like this. This is so much better than before. So now what we're going to do is let's upload this into a Dataverse environment, and we'll replace the grid that's on there, and we'll see what it looks like up there. Okay, so to deploy this, we're going to go ahead and stop this test harness from running, and then we'll do the same as we've done before. We'll do a pack PCF push here. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this. Okay, great. So that has now been published. So now let's go up to our org and we'll take a look. And here I am in the account form. So this is the same form that we made our customizations to earlier. And what we'll do now is we're going to add a subgrid. So I'm going to drag across this subgrid here, and it's going to ask me to select the subgrid views. And this time what we'll do show related records, and we are going to do contacts here. So if I find contacts, and so this looks good, and we're going to show all contacts related to this new account, okay, to an account. So I'll click done here. And so the next thing we'll want to do is set this to our PCF control, because this is using the standard component now. And if you scroll down over here on the right, you'll see components here, and what I find is sometimes this shows the components and sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of maybe a little bit buggy. I don't know if it's due to a trial environment. If I were to go ahead and click on components here, and there's a couple of components right here, but if I went on get more components, then in my case, nothing's showing up here, right? Even if I were to refresh and then go into the different tabs here. So sometimes it, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, but the other way to do this is through the classic interface. And so what I'm going to do is just save and publish this. And then we'll go and head over to the classic view here. And so here's our control, and I'm going to go to change properties over here. And then we'll go to the controls tab. And so currently we have the read-only grid. So if I click add control here, and then if we scroll down a little bit, here is our sample dataset control. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click add, and make sure that you check these boxes here for the appropriate system that you'll be connecting from, and then we'll click OK here. And so now we'll just go ahead and do a save and publish on this side, and we should be able to see our control. Okay, that's been done. Let's go over to our page now. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and here we have it. Okay, so here is our new grid. This is our subgrid, and it is now rendered as a PCF control, and it's showing our data here. Okay, so let's try something here. So you can actually see here that it's actually the same grid as what we have over here on the right. So this contacts here is actually the same data and the same subgrid, but it's just a different control. So if I were to go here and let's just add a new contact here, and I'm going to call the contact Bob Smith. And if I click save and close, and you can see here, it's added Bob Smith over here, right? And then we also have Bob Smith here. So I added it on this side, and it's automatically refreshed this control here. And obviously I didn't give it an email, which is why it's showing null there, okay? And you can handle that in your PCF control. So that's how to build your own grids, standard PCF control grids. Not too complicated, right? But you can make it as complicated as you want, because you can build all kinds of additional functionality in there. So we've done a lot of stuff so far, and hopefully you're hanging in there. The next thing, the big area that we're going to tackle next is React. So React is a framework and a library that was built at Facebook in 2010. And basically there was an engineer that was working at Facebook, and he needed to update the news feed and he wanted to update the newsfeed without refreshing the entire page, right? And so he built this framework called React in order to make it more efficient, make it easier to do that task, right? And that's how we ended up with React. And now React is used by a lot of companies around the world. It's one of the biggest frameworks out there, okay? If you want to learn React, this site here is a great starting point, react.dev. And you can go through here and basically see, how to build components and really how this all fits together. And what we will do is we're going to create a component ourselves now, just outside of PCF Controls, just to get our hands a little dirty here and just to understand the background of React and maybe understand a bit more about why we're using React in PCF Controls to begin with. And so to learn React, really the skills that you'll need is JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and then you'll learn some other things as well, such as JSX, which is a JavaScript extension that is used heavily inside of the React code. And then really, this page here is a great starting point, the react.dev site, because it goes into all kinds of detail about learning React. And there's some basic principles that we need to kind of understand, I think, just at a high level, as we go into this. One of the nice things about React is the virtual DOM. So, when you create a web page, basically, you have a DOM or a document object model. And so each page is actually broken down into these kind of like a tree structure. And so what React does is React takes a copy of this and it's held virtually. And so the React engine does this all in the background. And then basically when you're building your React app inside the app, if you're making changes to the document object model, you're actually React in the background will make those changes to the virtual DOM, and that's going to be a lot faster and more efficient than making it to the big DOM. Okay, so React does this all in the background for you. So that's one of the concepts. One of the other concepts is React hooks. So hooks are basically functionality that's built into React, and that helps with things like managing state, performance, context, so various other things. So you could build these things by yourself in JavaScript, but the beauty of React is that with these hooks, it makes it so much easier to build them. And there's a little bit of a kind of a learning curve in using them the first time, but once you know how they work, then you use them everywhere in your React apps, and it's a lot more efficient. And I think one of the final concepts before we dive into creating a React app ourselves is the concept of components. So, even like if you just look at this web page here, for example, this web page has it has a search bar here. It has some navigation at the top here. It has a navigation on the left here. This is kind of like a list type navigation, right? You have these different types of elements here that are styled differently. Even this little thing down here, these are all components, right? So a page is made up of different components, and you can get down into as much fine detail as you want. Like, so for example, like this is a thumbs up and a thumbs down here. Those could be components within a component. which is this page useful, right? So things like buttons are components, and you can, once you build these components, you can use them in different areas of the app, right? So you see you're kind of building it up like this. And so React's amazing in that you can utilize components and just use them in different places here. And if we scroll down here, this talks about the creating and nesting components here. You actually see here, this is a button right here. And then you have, you've declared this button, and then you're nesting it into another component here, which is my app. So you get to use it in other components, right? And if we scroll down here, this talks about the markup of JSX. So this is how you write this JSX code here. So it's you're kind of building out, like you can see here, this is like CSS tags basically, or you have P, you have H1, but there's no quotes around this. You're just writing this out as you're inside of the actual component itself, right? So the syntax is a little bit different, and that's something that you'll get used to. This talks about adding styles, adding data, and then you can see here, like, this is kind of a component here that's been created, and then it gets more and more complicated, right? So you can go through and take a look at this. It's really very useful. And, if you start to get used to building React apps outside of PCF controls, then obviously it's going to help when you do build the PCF controls yourself. So next thing we'll do is we will create a React app. So the way to do it is I'm going to make a directory here, and I'm going to call this my React app, like this. And we'll go into that directory. And now we're going to run a command that will create a React app for us, and it's going to be npx create React app, and then you can call this whatever you want. So my React app. Okay. So in the same way that we do a PCF init, this is kind of how we're initializing our code here for the React app. So it's gone and created that for us here. It's still going. And while that's running in the background, I want to show something else here, the next concept here. So basically, the next thing about React is Fluent UI. So when you create your React app, you'll basically have the option to use Fluent UI or not, right? It doesn't have to be, your React app doesn't have to use it. But when it comes to PCF controls, this is really useful because Microsoft uses Fluent UI in order to style their controls, right? These controls are Fluent UI controls. And you can see here that there's two versions of Fluent UI that are kind of the main ones at the moment. The version 8 of Fluent UI and the version 9 of Fluent UI. And this page here is the V8. And so you can see here, like, for example, if I clicked on button here, we're going to see that this is a Fluent UI button here in version 8. And so, this is nice here, because you can come here, do show code, and then it shows you how to use the code here. And you can use this type of code in your PCF controls as well. And it shows you exactly what you need to import here in order to use this code. Okay, so this is the version 8 controls for Fluent UI. And if I just head back over here, you can see here that this is the, check out the new version V9, right? And version 9 is the latest and greatest. And this has, if we go down to button here, for example, and take a look, this is just the latest version, right? So it's just the styling is what we're calling modern here because it's the most modern of the controls for Fluent. And so there is an upgrade path here, and if we click here, the modern theming API here. And so this is kind of new, and basically what this does is it talks about an upgrade path of if you use version 8 for your controls, this is how you get them to version 9 now, right? So you get to take advantage of the latest and greatest. And you can see here it says the sample, so there is a sample that you can download here, and the sample is located here. If we click on this one, let me just go and take you guys over to it. And so it's in the Power App samples here, and this is the the component framework samples that show like a lot of interesting stuff that you can learn PCF controls from. And this one is the Fluent Theming API control here. And then, so if I just hit back again, that's the sample here, and it says the Fluent V9 sample with automatic application of current modern theme, and there's the V9 ones, and then you have the Fluent V8 sample styling itself by using the V8 theme provider. So there's a lot of things there that you can get deep into when it comes to the use of Fluent here. But you know, try out. We're going to go through an example anyway with the V8 controls, and but this is something that you'll want to be aware of when you're building this. And you know, I encourage you to really learn the V8 and V9. So let's flip back over to our app here that we just created. So it looks like it's been created here, and if we just scroll up a little bit, everything looks pretty good. We have some vulnerabilities, but that's fine. This is just a sample here. So this is our React app, and what we'll want to do now is hop into code, and we'll take a look and see what this looks like. And we're going to open this up here, and basically if I open up this folder structure here, this kind of looks pretty similar, right? You know, it's a typical app that has basically your like an index file. It has an app here, and one of the things we can do is, let's go over to the terminal here, and I am going to just run this. And the way we run this is the same as everything else. We do an npm start watch, and let's see if this works. And it does not. And you know why? Actually, I know why, because I am a level up here. So if I go into the directory here, we need to go into my React app one more level. And then let me try again here. So npm start watch. And it says that I already have something already running on this other port here. So that's fine. I'm just going to click yes. Cool, and look at that, there's our React app, right? So that's the app, and we can make changes to it just like we do with the PCF controls. So back here in code, we can, for example, like if I were to go into the app.js here, and let's say I just get rid of all of this stuff, and I'm just going to do a hello world here. And if I just type in hello world like this and save it, you know, because I'm on npm start watch, it's going to refresh that automatically. And we can see here that it's now showing hello world. And if I were to add some JSX in here, right? So if I just do like an h1 tag and put that over here and save it, now it's going to display that as a heading. And actually that didn't work. Let me do h1 like this, because it is obviously case sensitive. I'm not sure why I did capitals there. And there is our code. So that's just a really high level overview of React. And let's hop back over to the PCF test now. We'll go back to that and talk through how to implement these React PCF controls. So the first thing we'll do here is we will create a new folder, and we'll create a React project. So I'm going to go back into my command prompt here, and we are going to make directory, and we'll do a React field control, let's call it. Okay, so that's our directory. We will go into it, and now we're going to do the pack PCF init. So we'll do pack PCF init, and then we provide the name, and we'll call this React field control, and then we will provide the namespace, and we'll give that a similar name. And then we need to provide the template here, and it's going to be a field. And here is where we get to decide whether it's going to be React or standard. And so we're going to do FW for framework, and we're going to do React here. So that's the differentiator for these templates, okay? And then I'm going to do npm so that I don't need to run npm install. So I'm going to click enter here, and we'll let that run. And you know, it's very fast how it just brings down the template, and then the install is going to take a little bit more time. Okay, that's run. So now we can open this up with the code command to look at this in VS Code. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look around this React project here. So as we saw here, we are doing an import of React here. And here as well, we are doing an import from this hello world here, okay? So we can see here we're importing hello world, and we are importing the hello world props. And if we head over to that file, we'll see here that this is where these are defined, right? So we have these interfaces that we're exporting here, and this is the props here, and this here is the hello world interface. And what we're doing here is basically exporting a label, right? So they provided us with a very simple example here where our PCF control is just simply a label, and in the props here, the name we can set, and that's going to be the label itself, all right? So back in the TS file, we have a couple of things here. We have the component here, which is component framework React control. And then if we go down a little bit here, we have, this looks a little bit different as well. So in the init here, we already have this notify output changed here. And so this is a little bit different from the init from the standard control, which basically had nothing inside it, okay? The update view here, we already have a React.create element. So here is where we are actually displaying our control, and you can see here, this is the props here that we're setting. So we're setting it here in the name to hello world here, right? So there would be nothing stopping us from grabbing this from the property, just like we did with the standard control. But in terms of the template, they're just hard coding it here, okay? So it's creating the template, returning that to the interface, and if we scroll down, we still have the get outputs and we still have the destroy, and there's nothing in there at the moment, okay? So all this really does is it just basically displays a label to the user. And so what I want to do firstly here is head over into the terminal, and what we'll do is we will run this in our test harness and see what it looks like. So we're going to do an npm start watch, and let's take a look. Okay, and we see here that we get the same message that we have gotten previously about the code gen here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this. npm install -- save dev ajv. Great, let's go back into npm start watch. Okay, so we can see here that in the test harness we have the label, right? So very super simple example and very similar to the standard control that we created as well. And I do want to point out that, you know, if you hit F12 here and you jump into the debugger here, you'll be able to do some debugging just like we did with the standard control. So, you know, in this case, if I were to change the value here, it's going to hop into the update view, and then we can go ahead and take a look at some of the properties and see what's going on here and do some debugging, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and play this, and let's close out of this. And the next thing I want to do is deploy this up to the Dataverse just so we can see what the label looks like, okay? So back here in VS Code, I'm just going to stop this, and we will push this up to the Dataverse, and we will use the same pack PCF push. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so that's been published. So now let's go into our Dataverse org, and let's bring across a new field here. So I'm going to use the account number again here. We have 2 account number fields here. Okay, so I'm going to drag that one here into the account information. And so these 2 are the same. So we have our previous PCF control here. That's the standard one. And that's showing us a button. And here we have the same field, but we're going to bind this to our React control. And so I'm going to go into components here, and I'll add a new component, and I'm going to click get more components. And here is our React field control. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and click add here. I am going to click React field control here, and then I choose what I want this to display on, and I'm going to click done. Okay, so there is our hello world. Okay, so it looks the same as basically the standard one that we created. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here where I will hide the label here on the field, okay? Because in this case, we don't really care too much about the account number, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Publish here, and that will be published, and then we can just go ahead and take a quick look at it in the Dataverse. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over to our account form. We're going to refresh this form here, and then we'll see the new field appear. Great, so there is our label. Excellent. So next up, let's change this, because let's hop back over to VS Code. And if we go back into our component here for our Hello World component, basically, as we saw, this is a label here, and this label is coming from here from Fluent UI, okay? So it's a Fluent UI label, but what if we want a text box or something different, right? So the way to do that is come into here, and in this import, we're only importing the label so far. So I'm going to change this to import a text field, okay, which is part of the Fluent UI React here. So in changing that, it's going to display an error here with the label. So I'm going to change this also to a text field. And let's do it like this. We'll get rid of this label here. And that should be it there, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's go and jump back into our test harness here. And we'll take a look and see what this looks like. So I'll do an npm start watch. And cool, that looks good, right? We have this big text box. It's quite a big text box here. So if I change this value, nothing happens over here on the right with the property. That's expected because it's not really linked up yet. And vice versa, if I were to come over here to the value and start changing the value here, nothing changes in the text field, okay? So that all looks good. I'm gonna go back to VS Code, and let's actually set some values here. So I'm gonna change this here to add the value of the props. So I'm going to do value is equal to, and then it's going to be this.props.name, okay, .name. So here we are setting the value itself off the text field to the property here, okay, the props here of the name, right? So I'm going to save this, and back in our TS index.ts file here, if we scroll down a little bit, our props here are actually being set to hello world, and that's what we're rendering here, okay? So if we go back to our test harness, we can now see that it's getting hello world, right? Now that's all good, but then it's still not the properties here. So let's go back over to VS Code, and instead of setting the name here like this, we're going to grab it from the context, just like we did with our previous example here. And it's going to be like this, and we need to put in this here as well, okay? And in this case, it's not the name, it's actually going to be the sample property, okay? Not sure why name came up. So now if I save this, let's go back over to our test harness, and now we can see that the value here is matching up with the property, okay? So if I were to change here the text box, nothing's changing. If I type into the value over here, we can see that the text box is changing, okay? So changing the property on the right is changing the text box on the left. So back over into our code, what we see here is that what we see here is when the update view runs, right, which is called when any new value in the property bag is changed. When that happens, we are going to set the property name here, the name itself of our props. We're going to set that to the value in the property bag, okay? And then that, if we come back over here into our component, that value comes here and sets it in the text field, all right? So I think that kind of makes sense, right? It's kind of fairly straightforward. Now, what if we want to go back the other way? So to go back the other way, we need to add an onChange event on our text field, and that's going to say, you know, when the value changes in the text field, go and update the property itself, all right? So to do that, we're going to do a couple of things here, is create a property for our update value, okay? So I'm going to go and create a property here for update value, and we're going to take this here and basically initialize it like this, all right? So now in our text field, if we want to use this, we can come in here and we can say, on the onChange of the text field, let's go and grab this and see what it looks like. So on the on change of the text field, right, what we're doing is we're basically saying update the props value here with the new value. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we'll head back over to our TS file. And we can see here that the props is throwing an error here, and it's saying property update value is missing in the type. Okay, so we need to add that in. But the first thing we need to do here is create a new property up here. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to do private underscore value, and that is going to be a string like this. Okay, so this is going to be a place to store our value here as we go through this. So now let's come back into here, and I'm going to add this code in here, and I'm going to actually create a new method here, and the method is basically going to be update value like this. And let's go ahead and grab this code here. So this basically says private method update value. Basically we're passing in a string, and we're saying set the underscore value that we created here as a property here to the value that we're passing in, okay? And when that happens, we want to notify our output has changed, right? So it'll go ahead and run the get outputs down here, okay? So that looks good. So now back over here, we're adding a new method, new property here, sorry, to the props. And the props is going to have here the update value, and we are binding we are setting this to update value bind this, all right? In our get outputs here, we want to set the sample property to the value. So that's a lot to take in, but I think this looks good. Let's go ahead and save this, and we'll head back over to our development environment, and we'll take a look. Okay, so we have both values are currently in sync here. So now if I delete a value here from the right-hand side property, we can see that it's updating the text box that we have, the text field. If I go into the text field and delete the value here, we can see that it has now updated the property on the right, okay? So I think we have everything in sync now. And let's go ahead and publish this up to our org, and we'll take a look and see how it looks up there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this from running, and we will do a pack PCF push. Great, that's been deployed. So now let's go over to our org, and we'll refresh this page here. And here is our text box, okay? So we can click into it, and you can see here it's a really nice fluent control, right? Now, if we start to type here, and you'll see here that we have the page is currently saved up here. If we start to type here, then we see that the page has now gone to unsaved, okay? And basically, we can use this control just like a text box, and I can go ahead and save this here. And if we come back into this form, we'll see that this value has actually been saved against the account number here. And one way you can also see this just quickly through Advanced Find. So if I hop into Advanced Find over here, and I'm going to select accounts here, and then we will click Edit Columns. I'm going to add in here the account number column. So if I do account number in here, and then I close this, and let's go ahead and run this. And we can see here, down here, this sample account PCF, this one has the test in here, right? So this is the one. And if I come back in here and I change this value here, so if I put a number 2 on the end of this, click Save, and then if I go back, we'll see here that the value has been persisted, right? So we're storing this value against the field that we have selected here for the control. So that's React field controls. I encourage you to learn a lot more about React, because these concepts will make so much more sense, right? It's hard to really see this for the first time and really understand it. But what you'll want to do is install the React control, but also build some React websites without PCF. And that will kind of give you the bigger picture here of what's going on, right? It'll make it so much easier to understand. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is React Dataset Controls. So this one is a bit more complicated, and let's go and create a React Dataset Control first, and we'll just go ahead and take a look at the code. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory, and we'll call this React Dataset Control, and let's go into that directory. Okay, so I'm in the directory. So now all I need to do is run the same command that I've been running before, and it's going to be pack PCF init, and then I'm going to give this a name, and we'll call this React Dataset Control, and then we do the namespace, React Dataset Control namespace, and then here is where I'm going to set the template, so -t for template, and this is going to be the dataset template, okay, and then here is the framework, and I'm going to set this to React, okay, and then I'll do -npm to run this command at the same time. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so that's been installed. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at this in VS Code. And over here we have the same structure as before. And if I go into the index.ts here, we can see that this actually looks very similar. Let's go into the control manifest here. And you can see here that we have the data set, right? So the data set is the difference between the field and the dataset control, obviously. So we're using the dataset template here. And really, most of this does look very similar to what we've already seen. If we head into the Hello World TS, all they're really doing here is just rendering a label. So they're just using the same template as the field. They don't really have a field a dataset template that they're displaying here through this particular component. But that's okay because it sets us up for being able to create these dataset components using React. Okay. So I'm not going to go into creating a React data set in this video here. What I'm going to do is leave that potentially for a future video and get more into the advanced, because this is more of an advanced topic, right? And there's a lot of good advanced stuff that I want to get to at some point, and we can't really cover all of this in the huge amount of information that we've already gone through. Or to take in at least, let's say, for beginners. And so, but what I do want to do next is we're going to hop over to the PCF gallery. And what we'll do is we'll download some already made dataset controls, and I want to apply those to my Dataverse, and we'll see how they actually look and how you can configure them. So to do this, let's go over to PCF gallery. And this is the site that we looked at previously. And now I'm going to go down here and we will scroll down, and here we have dataset. Okay, so we have 12 of these dataset controls that the community built. It's so cool, you know, like look at all these great controls here. They look so much fun. Look at this, URL image list. That looks really fun with some characters here. We have Noted here. We have dataset with filters, dataset to Excel. So there's so much cool stuff going on here. Let's go ahead and grab this dataset with filters one and take a look at it. And we can see here that it has, so it looks like it has this cool dataset being rendered here. If we scroll down a little bit, I'm going to click on the download here, and we can take a look at the solution. And basically, as with all of these, you can jump into the code. So if I go into the code here, and then here's our index.ts file. And then you can take a look here and you can kind of tell, like, was this made with React or not, right? At least was it made with the React template that is provided that we went through. And so this one is not, and, that's totally fine. It's up to the developer how they want to build these, right? The standard controls can do easily enough cool stuff. What I'm going to do here, let's go back over here and I'm going to scroll down to React, and we can actually see there is a section for it. I don't know how organized this is in terms of the tagging necessarily with these projects, but some of these are some different React controls, it looks like, that have been developed for fields. So you can see here, this is a React select lookup, and this is a React field UI virtual multi-select thing here. And then we have some React tagging going on. So lots of cool stuff. Look at this Tic Tac Toe. Like, that's incredible. It's amazing. And if we go over to authors here, this is a nice way to see what each author has built. And there's so many authors here that have contributed here. I don't know the number here, and I'd love to find out that number if someone could tell me here. But there's so much stuff here. And I mentioned before we have the PCF lady here, and she's done some really cool, interesting, fun controls. And one of the nice ones here is the colorful option set grid. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. And this is a control that shows option sets with colors customized using the standard experience inside a grid. So that's really nice. And let's go ahead and download this, and we will go through the process of actually applying this grid to our Power App. So we'll see the process of how do you use these controls? Like, what do you do? I'm at the PCF gallery. How can I use this in my environment? Okay, so that's what we're going to go through now. Okay, so let's go and implement this colorful option set grid here in the Dataverse environment. And there's a couple of ways that you can generally install these PCF gallery controls. Some of the authors will provide a solution file, and if there's no solution file, then we can just download the source code. Most of the authors put their source code on GitHub with the link here on the PCF gallery site. So you can bring down the source code and then basically run an npm install and then be able to deploy it up to your Dataverse, right? So if we go and hit the download button here, let's take a look at what this one has. So we can see here there is a solution directory. And if we go into this, there's actually no solution zip file in this one. Okay, so that's fine. Even if there was one, I want to take you guys through actually installing this the other way. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to grab the zip file here, and you can clone this as well if you want. That's the other way to do it. But the other way, the way I'm just going to show you now is just to download the zip file. And we're going to open up this zip file here, and you'll want to go ahead and extract the contents into a folder. All right. So I've gone ahead and done that here, and we can see that this looks basically like a standard PCF project, you see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this up in VS Code, and here I have it open in VS Code. And something to point out real quick here, this was built by Diana, the PCF lady, and she's so cool, right? She's basically created the this settings file here, which holds the colors of VS Code. So when you open up this particular project, it's themed to be kind of the theme color, I guess, of the colorful option set, right? So love the attention to detail. So what we want to do first is run npm install. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's going to bring down the project dependencies. Okay, that's been done. So now the next thing is we will push this up to our org with the pack-pcf push command. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so that's been deployed up to our Dataverse org. So now let's go ahead and wire this up to our view. So let's go over, and what we'll want to do here is come into the Power Apps Maker portal, and we're going to switch over to Classic here, and we'll need to do this one in Classic, this particular piece here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do this on the account form, and so we'll apply this colorful option set grid to the account form and to the account table, sorry. And in that table, I have a view that actually shows the industry code, which is an option set. And what we'll do is we'll see in our data the different colors that can be displayed through this custom control here, right? So in the default solution here, I have selected account, and this is going to open up in a second. And you'll want to come over here to the controls tab, and then you can see here that the current control is the read-only grid. We're going to go and add a control here, so I'm going to click on this. And if we scroll down a little bit here, we'll be able to find the colorful option set. And here it is. So I'm going to select this here, and I'm going to click add, okay? And adding it is going to make it appear in this list, but now we need to actually set where we want to use it. So I'm just going to select all three here. And now we have the some configuration here. And you can see that for this particular PCF control, there's quite a lot that you can configure. And if you go to the GitHub site, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of documentation in terms of all the cool things that you can do with this control. We're going to keep it pretty simple for now. So what we'll do is we will set an option set here. So this is where you select one of the fields that you will be providing to the control that says, okay, this is an option set. I want it to be colorful, right? And so here, if I hit the drop down, the one that I will be setting here is the industry code, okay? So I'm going to click OK here. And that's kind of it for this. The other thing I do want to point out here is that you will need to ensure that the option set that you're using has colors specified. Let me go ahead and just save this and publish this. And then I'm going to open up the option set field and show you just where that needs to be set. Okay, so that's been saved. Let's go ahead and publish this. Okay, so if we head over to fields over here, and let me go over to the industry field, and let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit here. So this one here is the field that we will be using. So if I open this up and scroll down, when you select each of these options of the option set, down here we have a color, right? So you'll want this to be set here. If you don't do anything with these, then what's going to happen is the control is just going to kind of display like a gray color, or it did in my case anyway. So just kind of like a default color, and they'll all be the same color, right? So you don't want that. That's not the point of this. You want it to be different colors, okay? So just make sure you go ahead and do that. I have some pink going on here for consulting, for example, and different shades here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now. So I'm going to close this, and we'll go over to our org. And let me hit F5 to refresh this. And this is the view here. And what I did is I added the industry code to the My Active Accounts view. Okay, it's not there automatically, but I just added it in just to show you how this would look, right? So here it is. So this is a custom PCF control data set that we have applied here to this view, okay? And we get to have all this cool coloring in here because that's what the PCF control does, right? So you can see here, like accounting is this kind of blue shade, and so both accounting records have the same color because they are the same value. And then we have consulting, which is a kind of a pink color, and then consumer services, which is a bit of a darker pink color or something like that. Okay, so that's basically how we apply a PCF gallery control, and we upload it. And not only that, but this is also how you apply a dataset grid to a view here. Great. So next up is Canvas apps and custom pages. So how do we use these controls to because we've been doing this with model-driven apps, but how do we apply this to Canvas apps and custom pages? Let's go through an example here of this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to search for Tic Tac Toe here. So this is a control that was provided here by David Martinez Alcantara. Okay, so he built this control, and it looks so cool because it's Tic Tac Toe, right? You can play the game Tic Tac Toe. That's so cool. So let's go ahead and try to install this and see how it looks. And so I'm going to click on this here, and I can grab the code like this, download the zip file. And once I've downloaded the zip file, I can open this up in VS Code and run npm install, and that's what I've done, and it's downloaded the node modules for me here. Okay, so the next thing is to push it up to the org. So I'm going to do that here with the pack PCF push. And and same with this. I don't think there's a managed solution for this one, so I'm just going to publish it up this way. Great, so that's been published. So now let's go back over to our org. And let's go ahead and create a new app here. And I'm going to create a Canvas app. And we're going to call this one My PCF Test, for example. We'll keep it a tablet and hit create. Okay. And before we do anything else, what we'll need to do here is head over to the admin center. and go ahead and select your environment. So I'm going to select my customer service trial, hit settings, and then if you expand product and then features here, basically scroll down on the right hand side and we have this here, Power Apps Component Framework for Canvas apps. All right, allow publishing of Canvas apps with code components. So you'll need to turn that on here. Turn it on like that and make sure that you come down on the bottom right and hit save once you make that setting change. So then back over here in our Canvas Apps Designer, what we can do is come in here and we'll do, we click on the plus sign here to insert a control. Let me just get rid of this here on the right. And down here on the left, we have get more components because basically there's a code components area that doesn't show right now that will show. And if we click on get more components, we'll see here that there's these two tabs here, Canvas and Code. So if you don't set that value in the settings that we just did, you're not going to see this code tab here, and you won't be able to add your component, your PCF control. All right. So we've gone ahead and done that, and here is the control that we just uploaded, the Tic Tac Toe one. So I'm going to go ahead and click Import here. And then we have code components here, and there it is. So all I need to do is just drag this across into the page here, and there is our component, right? We can resize it if we want. And in order to test this out, all I need to do is just hit the play button over here, and I can start playing this game. So if I just click a button here now, it's put an X on the box, inside the box, and now it's switched at the bottom to show who the player is now. So if I'm sure you've probably played this game before, but basically each player is going to put an X or an O, and they're going to try to get 3 in a row here from any angle. So if I click now as the second player, I get an O, it's flipped back to the X, and then I can keep playing the game like this, and you can see here, and there, I've won that game because there was 3 X's in a row, right? So this is running inside of this Canvas app here, and that's really it. That's all I need to do to get this control to work. There's so many different types of controls. If you head over to the PCF gallery here and you just click search, what you can do is you can check this box here, made for Canvas apps, and then when you hit search here, it comes up with all of these controls, right? So right now there's 126 that are where the authors have specifically said that this is built for Canvas apps. And we can do the same thing with custom pages. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's just go back into the default solution again, and I'm going to create a new page here. So app page, okay. So custom pages are basically kind of like Canvas apps that are running inside of model-driven apps. Okay, they're kind of the bridge here, okay. And so in the exact same way, we can add this control here. So I'm going to add this real quick, and then I'm going to basically apply this custom page to a model-driven app, and we'll see what that looks like. So if I do get more components, and we can do this really quickly here. I'm going to click on code. We can add in our Tic Tac Toe component once again, drag this onto the form, and I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to call this my Tic Tac Toe app. Click save, and then I'm going to go ahead and publish this here and publish this version. Okay, so that's been done. So now if I go ahead and click back, and I can click leave here, and we will go over to let's do this. I'm going to go back to solutions here. I'm going to click on apps, and I'm going to add this just into the Sales Hub app here. So I'm going to edit this app, and what we'll do is we'll add a page here, and let's do this right at the top here. So if I scroll up, and in my work here, I'm going to go ahead and add a new page, and we can do a custom page. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to use an existing one, and I'm going to click this one, my Tic Tac Toe app, the one that I just created. Click add here, and this message is fine. It just says we need to republish it. So I'm going to click save here and republish, and then we'll be able to see this inside of the model-driven app. Okay, let's go back over here to my app. I'm going to refresh this, and let's click on my Tic Tac Toe app here. And there it is, right? So there's the app inside it. Now I can go and play the same game, right? So it's embedded the app inside of custom page here, and we can look at that. I didn't even get, well, there's the animation that I was looking for. So we have the app embedded here, and it's inside of a model-driven app, and it's a PCF control, and it's on a custom page, right? So if that all makes sense, you will maybe get a scenario where you need that kind of pattern. But this is more to demonstrate, at least anyway, that this is what it looks like, right? Okay, great. So now we have seen model-driven apps, custom pages, canvas apps. And the next thing that I want to show is Power Pages. So using a PCF control in Power Pages, right? And let's go back to an example that we started with, one of the earlier ones where we added a button, the PCF control button, to a form. Okay, now we have the button here, and it's all good. It's ready to use. And so I have a site here, a Power Pages site that I created, and we're going to add this form onto the site, and we'll see how to use the PCF control on that form. Okay, so here's the page. I'm going to click on form here to add this to my home page. And obviously this may not be a real world example here, but this is, again, purely just to show the principles. So I'm going to click on new form here and choose a table. So the table is going to be the account table. That's where we will store this, grab this form from. And the form I'm going to use is the account form. And that all looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK here, and we'll see the form load. And now if I just scroll down a little bit here, this is the form field here. It actually doesn't show a button yet. And if I click on this here, we get this little pop-up that says Enable Code Component, right? And I'm going to go ahead and click on Enable Code Component here. And here I want to click on this to yes, and I want to click Done here. Okay, so now it's enabled the PCF control to be used. So they have this extra level here of checking, perhaps. I'm not sure why exactly they do that, but it kind of makes sense, right? You may not want to run a code component specifically on a Power Page. It says here, unable to load this component in Studio. That's okay. We don't need to see it in Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and sync this now. And there is actually one more step that I need to do. We're going to go back and do this, and that is to set the table permissions here of that of the account, because we are going to be exposing this table data, right? Okay, so let's go over to table permissions here, and I'm going to add a new permission here, and it's going to be for accounts, and the table here will be account. And the access type, global access. And this doesn't really matter. I'm just going to check all of these because remember, this is just purely to see the PCF control in action. Okay. So I'm checking all of these. You would most likely not do this in a real world scenario. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And that will allow us to have anonymous access to the account table when we see the account form on the homepage. Okay, so it's just a shortcut I'm doing so that we don't need to, haven't put this behind an authenticated user and log in and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and sync this now, and we will go ahead and preview this. And the form is now showing, and here is the click me, right? So that is our PCF control. And if we click on this, we can see it works, right? We get the hello world here. And so that was the alert code that was inside of the PCF control. So that's it. PCF controls running in Power Pages. So that's it. That's the whole video. We covered so much stuff here. We covered how to create PCF field controls, dataset controls, standard controls, React controls, model-driven app controls, canvas apps controls, custom pages controls, and also finished with Power Pages, right? So lots to learn and cover there, and really the next steps is to get your hands dirty, download the things that are required to build these PCF controls and just start to play around with these. You know, the more you play around with this, the more this is going to make sense. So, you know, keep coming back to the video, keep revisiting it, pause it, fast forward it, you know, just keep learning, and you should be in a good place when it comes to building these controls for your projects. Thank you so much, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really helps me with being able to build content like this. Thank you all. So that's it, guys. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and of course check out my blog at carldesouza.com. Thank you.